This is Female Economics, Why Women Buy, episode number 6 with Carolina Rogoll, faculty member of the MPSB Masters in Branding at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. Welcome to Female Economics, Why Women Buy. I'm your host, Daryl Mobley, and this feature is brought to you by JanetTV.com. JanetTV.com is an online channel that provides 24 hours a day coverage of athletic and active females and their sporting interests, sporting events, original programming, scores, and news, delivered to viewers via computers, laptops, cell phones, tablets, gaming consoles, and connected TVs. Women are more powerful consumers than ever before. They control $3.3 trillion in consumer spending, are responsible for 80% of household buying, and control 50% of the wealth in the U.S. Despite this, many marketers fail to fully recognize and reach this tremendous audience. Quite honestly, connecting with females of any age is becoming increasingly challenging as women are engaging in an increasingly complex mix of activities involving work, family, friends, and self. To help companies connect their product and services with this enormously valuable audience, Female Economics, Why Women Buy, brings you thought leaders to share their powerful insights regarding the best methods for reaching and persuading women. Each week, join me for powerful messages and interviews that will leave you inspired and ready to better meet the needs of an audience that is just too big to miss out on. I should warn you, the Female Economics, Why Women Buy podcast is fast-paced and very direct. I ask pointed questions, and you always get the answers. Carolina Rogoll has been building brands for more than 10 years in the consumer goods industry, including successfully managing a billion-dollar brand. Carolina has worked across different product categories, excelling at leading complex initiatives and diverse teams. She has a strong brand building and business management track record and is known for raising the bar in performance for the organization. Dedicated to growing capability, she is a faculty member of the MPSB Masters in Branding at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where she teaches a very popular brand management seminar. Carolina graduated magna cum laude in Business Administration from the Universidad de los Andes, Colombia, South America, and summa cum laude with a dual undergraduate degree in Marketing and Management from the A.B. Freeman School of Business at Tulane University in New Orleans, Louisiana. Carolina graduated with honors with her MBA at the Williams College of Business at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio. Carolina speaks German and Spanish fluently and intermediate Italian and Portuguese. You will enjoy Carolina's insights. Let's get started with Carolina right now. Welcome, friends. I am delighted to have with me today Carolina Rogoll. Carolina, welcome to Female Economics, Why Women Buy. How are you doing today?
Very good, Daryl. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to your audience today.
Well, no problem. I know they're going to love what you have to say, and I'm looking forward to it myself. Let me jump right into this with a very direct, very blunt question. Tell me what business failure has taught you. You know, a failure to maybe reach a business goal, sales, share, profit, whatever it is. Tell me what it has taught you.
Daryl, that's indeed a great question. And honestly, you know, what I've learned from business failure in that when in doubt, I should have followed my gut. There are really mistakes that I've made following a strategy that was fundamentally wrong, and that's what caused the execution to fail. So I think for me, when you're struggling with a business project, you really need to try to put it in simple terms so that you can really talk about the red flags. You know, examples of this for me have been when I have not been true to the core of a brand, or when I have fallen in love in a technology versus the idea itself, or trying to go after a broader target with a niche proposition. I really feel that when I've disregarded the basics and when I have not followed my gut is, let's say, when you fail as a marketer. So I've learned, and this is what I teach the students all the time, is you have to very quickly distill down the business proposition, what it is it really that you're solving, and why, to really make sure that you have the right compass and that you don't fail.
Wow, the right compass. That is very, very powerful stuff. You come right out smoking here. Now, you mentioned something I found interesting. I just want to probe a little bit. You said that going after, I think, growth or major growth with a niche proposition. Can you just explain that a little bit? Because that was very interesting.
Sure. So at times I think we believe that right off the bat, all our propositions, let's say, should reach all consumers. Or we just believe that our brand is going to be appealing to everybody. And the reality is the more, let's say I'm in this business, the more I work with the students, the power of really knowing who you are as a brand, what you're going after, and the target that you're going after is what you need to do in the early phases of the development of a brand strategy. Because if you're shooting for too broad of a target and actually your proposition is not compelling, you're just going to be wasting media dollars for something that you could have done in a more targeted way. And vice versa, if you're really trying to delight a group that is smaller, you should be using different tools than using mass tools. So it's about, going again to the concept of compass that you like. It's about finding the right balance and the right approach between what you're offering and the consumers to whom that's really interesting, and making those decisions early in the process before you spend a lot of money trying that in the market itself.
Wow. Very strong opening, Carolina. Very, wow. You coming out smoke. Great stuff. Question number 2. Why do female consumers choose a brand?
So I think that in every purchase, whether we are female or male consumers, there's a rational and emotional side to everything we do. I think with women in particular, and brands that do well among women, is because they do both well. They speak to the rational need from consumers and also the emotional need. And then the brand experience that really surrounds, in this case, women, should really be consistent in terms of how you're speaking to both the rational and the emotional need. Tone of voice, the message itself, packaging is really important, and the experience. So I think, female consumers choose brands because they speak to both the heart and the mind, as we like to say as marketers. And I think in the last couple of years, this is the resurgence of really consumers wanting to know what's the why behind brands, not just what they offer. So I see more and more, I guess, the purpose of a brand being a connecting point for consumers today. And since female consumers tend to be more perceptive and more sensitive to the message and really the experience that surrounds the brand, I would say those things are really important for a brand trying to target female consumers.
Now, see, okay, now you've kind of blowing my head off my shoulders here with all this good stuff here. Do you have experience marketing in the U.S. and outside the U.S. or just in the U.S.?
Both. Majority of my career has been in the U.S., but since I've worked at multi international companies,
sure.
Of course I've had exposure to other markets as well.
Okay, great. Then here's my question. Would you say, because you mentioned the emotional and the rational, by the way, I'm taking notes. That's how good your stuff is. I'm taking notes on what you say here. So when you mentioned the female consumers, the rational and the emotional, speaking to both the brand experience, all that stuff, would you say that the rational and emotional needs of women as regards marketing to them, is it the same out of the U.S. as in the U.S.? Would that same insight be equally true if I was marketing to women in Spain or in Germany or Colombia?
Yes, I think it's the case, right? Because I think this theory is applied to just how female consumers' brain works a little different than male, right? Which makes it even more in tune with aesthetics and the emotional message. I think, of course, when we think about global insights, right, there's definitely local and cultural insights where how women connect with certain messages might differ. Example being the role of women, it changes by culture, right? So there might be messages that work very well in the U.S. that might not work in other countries where the role of women, let's say, are defined in a different way, let's say more developing countries or some countries where some religious aspects as well could be, let's say, limiting the way in which women, in many cases can connect with brands or with communication in general. So I think when we talk about the core principles of, let's say, female insights, I think they're general across the board, but then the cultural specifics in terms of the role of women and what they do and what they're allowed to do in society, of course, will shape what type of messages or what type of brand connections are more effective in some regions versus others.
Wow, very good, very good, very nice. Well, in your experience now, you have a broad experience, a number of years behind, I used to call it pushing brands, making brands relevant. You have a number of years experience there. Why do female consumers not choose a brand? In your experience, when they turn away from a brand, what is it that causes them to turn away?
I think our female consumers in general are very perceptive and smart. So when a brand really doesn't speak for them, they know it's not for them. They know it's for another target. So brands that are not able to connect with females emotionally or rationally, I think that's what I would say is when it doesn't speak to them. I think connected to that, sometimes, let's say, to define females, you almost can resist to talk about what is different with male consumers, right? And, a couple of things to think about is that, let's say, even from the functional and rational side of how consumers make decisions, let's say if we look at the male consumer, perhaps functionality, the rational side and rationality of purchases plays a stronger role because we know, let's say, the male brain is more utilitarian compared to the female brain, right? Now, things that are more visual, sensorial, and attention to details are something that we would say are more important, let's say, for the female consumer. And in certain categories, you think about also the differences in the role shopping plays, let's say, in a category selection or product selection, could also result in a different type of expectation and how the consumer connects, right? Because browsing, for example, in certain categories, if that's important, the female consumer could be more likely to find shopping in certain categories, something that they're more willing to do. The male consumer, let's say, it's almost more in and out of store. What's the functionality? Of course, it still needs to speak to them. So there's a couple of things. It varies by category. You would argue that male consumers get really, really passionate about cars, in the same way that females get really passionate about other categories. So I think it changes by category, but depending on how our brains are wired, we might be more in tune with certain parts of a brand proposition. And that's, I think, what makes some of them more likely to be for male than for women.
I got you. Wow. Okay. All right. Now let me go directly to your experience. All the experience you have, and you kind of, it sounds like you've kind of grown up in the world of consumer packaged goods marketing as media has kind of exploded with the variety and just capability. You know what I mean? From social media to cable to just everything going on now, you have really kind of cut your chops. You're doing that. So tell me, for you, what roles do TV, radio, promotion, social media, internet, the newspaper industry, magazines, contests, email, what roles do those things play in your particular efforts to persuade female consumers to choose your brand or brands?
Yeah, Daryl, that's a great question. And let me start by saying I've tried them all. So, there's so much today that we can use as marketers and tools. I think the first thing is going back to, the target consumer. If we talk about women, we need to first recognize that she's very complex and you cannot really generalize them, right? So there isn't such as this vehicle is more effective with women, right? Because there's many of them. Yes. And also I would argue you can segment women by so many ways. You can talk about life stage, you can talk about income, you can talk about geography, you can talk about mindset, In this process of selection of what's the right vehicle, I really found that the first thing to do is to really understand what is the need that I'm trying to solve for this consumer, because the need becomes really the driver of choice for that consumer and why they're selecting a brand. Because let me tell you, there could be very different types of women that have different life stages. They could live in very different geographies, but you could fulfill that one need with one brand, but you might need to speak to them slightly differently. So I think once you understand really that need, then you can go and identify really these consumers that are interested in this need, how can they be most receptive to my message? And that is really when that relevancy of the message, when for that particular consumer she's willing to listen to your message, when is it that the right message can be presented, that is really how you select your tools, because it will vary by each need. Because it's very hard to say, okay, this message will work very well on TV. Well, it might not, depending on what it is. If, let's say, if this is a product that is, let's say, a personal use product or an intimate product, that's not something that your particular consumer would want to talk about, on TV, right? There are other tools like print or digital or, let's say, consultants, right, that might work. So the point is that in order to select the right vehicle, you first need to understand the consumer and then ask yourself the question, when and how will the consumer really be most receptive to that particular message and to the need that you're trying to solve? All the tools could play a role for the consumer, but I think you need to marry the consumer understanding and also the message itself to select the right vehicles to use to persuade the female consumer.
May I just say great answer? That's a great answer. It's a great answer. It makes sense. Wow, good stuff. I can see now why your seminar is so popular. This is very good stuff, very good stuff. Now, what role for you has consumer research played in the decisions you've made? Any particular things jump out at you?
Yeah, I think when you're building a brand, you need to have really that consumer or client interest front and center for the decision. Because let's be honest, Daryl, without the clients or the consumer, there's just no sales, right? And without the sales, there's no business. And if there's not a recurring business, you cannot build your brand over time, right?
Yes.
So I think the days where someone thought that not understanding the consumer will still be okay from a business perspective are gone, because our consumers are much more demanding than ever, right? So I think research, depending on what it is, the business question, the consumer appeal, or if you have sometimes specific questions that you want to get your consumer perspective on, they should be embedded into any brand development process or marketing process that any brand or company has. So I think it needs to be just front and center.
Okay, very, very much. All the years you've done business, all the years you've grown brands, all the research, all the marketing tools, tips, strategies, that's what builds up my next question. What is the most interesting thing you have discovered from research into the buying habits of women?
Yeah, my answer is probably going to be a little atypical, right? Because in this industry, we have an overwhelming amount of information and data and research suppliers, right? I really feel that the biggest insights have really come from observation from what the consumer is doing and going deeper, and sometimes really marrying the secondary data, right, with that observation from consumers. And I'm going to tell you why. I think many times it's more what you see than what the consumer tells you, especially, let's say, in a controlled environment that typically research is. And just like us, like people, consumers are not sometimes very self-aware on why they buy the brands they buy. So, marketers need to have more of a journalistic and inquisitive approach to how to talk to consumers. One example of this in one of my classes, I think this was 3 years ago, we had a specific project to build a brand strategy, and the teams were saying, okay, how do we go and talk to consumers? And one of the students had a very clever idea. what if we just survey their purses? And we're like, what? And yeah, so if we just invite women and we just take pictures of their purses and we just look what they have in it. And it was amazing to see this analysis that came out from just observing and comparing what women had in their purses in terms of signaling what type of purse they select. Are they on the go person or not? What are the products that are most important to them that they would bring with them? What does it say about them? Are they different, are they different types of decisions she's making throughout the day? It's just, I think that's a neat example of what ethnographic type of research allows you to do, to go more in depth. It's not just let's go and talk to consumers and have them answer these 10 questions. I think that purse exercise really was eye-opening for us, and it really allowed us to really explain also who these consumers are. Yeah, and this is what her purse might look like and what's in it. That would really give us more insight in how she was spending her time. What are the things that were so valuable to her that she would even, take with her all day? And what are the things that might not be as important?
Wow, that's so interesting. So let me see if I boil down what you're saying, it is that perhaps you can't always believe what consumers tell you, but what they buy, what they have, what they do is always a greater truth. And if you have that greater truth, then you can marry it with secondary data, which is by definition a little false because it's in a sterile environment and you're asked questions. But the truth is, you open their purses, that's the truth. That's what they buy, that's who they are. Is that close or not so close?
It's about connecting all the dots, Daryl, because I think there's more that meets the eye, right? Yes, of course, you want to hear from the consumer when they bought a product, where they bought it, and the reasons why. But you need to truly understand who that person is as a whole, right?
Yes.
To really draw conclusions on why is it what is the role that specific product is playing in her life. And I think at times, let's say when research is very template-y, if you will, or research just scratches the surface, is because we don't take into account the observation component of it, or the ethnographic component of what is it really in her life, what is the life tension that is associated with that one specific purchase. Now, that requires a lot of listening, that requires a lot of observations. It's not this, okay, let's go and talk to a consumer and I'll come back with an insight tomorrow, right? So I think, and I truly believe, I think this might be getting us off topic, but I think the future of marketing and brand management is really about human-to-human connections, right? So we need to understand who they are as a whole. And I think if we push a little bit more to get the holistic persona, that's when I think I've seen the better insights when you marry that observation with all the other data of what the consumer might say plus secondary data. But it gives you a stronger insight to latch on to have, let's say, a compelling brand proposition.
Wow, that's very good. And by the way, no, I don't think we've gone off track with what you said, but that is, you mentioned life tension, which is, in all of my interviews and discussions, no one's ever talked about the life tension inherent in a brand's purpose for a consumer, so that is fantastic. The purse exercise, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to repeat it and give you credit for bringing it up to me, because that is really fantastic. What they have in that purse, and you're right, what's going on in their life, and one-to-one, boy, fantastic. All right, so we've looked in their purses, we've done the ethnographic stuff, we've observed them, we've uncovered the life tension. We're all excited about that. Tell me about some of the barriers that exist between brands and female consumers, in your experience.
Yes, I would like to speak about the specific demanding lives of U.S. females, if you will, and that's true in other places of the world. But let's say I'm much more familiar, let's say, with the profiles of the female consumers in the U.S. I think lives for women have become much more complex. Multitasking is almost like the rule of the game for many women, whether they are in the workforce or not. The lives have gotten much more complex, and there's a lot of research that proves that the role of women in the U.S. society has changed dramatically in a couple of years. So I think with that, at the same time you see from all the branding and all the dollars that marketers have in the marketplace, there's also this explosion of choice, which really makes it harder for women to make faster choices on what are the right brands for them. So I think many times, our brands or the brands that are out there, create a barrier on its own when they're not very clear on whether that's the right product for them. So if there's one thing that brands could do to help women out is really to simplify their lives, is give them the cues and give them the consistent information that allows them to make a faster decision for them. And that's where segmentation and product design with the female consumer in mind plays a key role. So the more we'll design the product is, the more targeted the communication is onto what a brand stands for, the easier it will be for the consumer for the female consumer to pick the brand. Because I would tell you, let's say a lot of the brands that might be great brands for her that might not be in her consideration set, it's because they have not been able to really crystallize who they are and why they are the right brands for her. That's why many times if you're strapped for time, recommendation is still probably number one driver of selection for many women, right? Because if I'm going to take this risk, I don't have the time to take risk. I don't have the time, to browse through these 25 different brands. So I'm going to default to the most obvious one or the one that a mom or another friend recommended, right? So I think the explosion of choice is a barrier in and of itself, and to overcome it, the more distinctive a proposition can be, and the better it solves the consumer needs, and the better it's communicated to her, the higher chances you have that in the complex life of women, she might open that little window of consideration and to create preference for that brand.
Okay. All right. What is it that connects brands and female consumers? Maybe that's kind of a flip of what you just said, but.
Yeah, I think I would go back to the original principle that female or not female consumer, the emotional and rational side needs to be met, right, with the communication or with the visual identity. I think that the brands that connect very well with the consumer are also the ones that have that heightened emotional connection. So what are those cues, right? So it takes almost maybe peeling the onion a little further when you're designing a product where you're thinking about the communication is what's in it really for her. I think sometimes we have the tendency of marketers, okay, this is our benefit, this is what I'm going to put in the printout, and off you go. No, what's in it for her, right? Mm-hmm. And the more you communicate what's in it for her, from a higher order purpose, let's say referencing more the Maslow's pyramid, right? Some of those higher order benefits of self-actualization, etc., the higher the chances of a female brand will become really devoted to the brand and be engaged. A couple of things that I do know, let's say, for female consumers that is important to keep them engaged. Of course, I talked earlier about the concept of risk, right? If the woman's life is very complicated, in certain categories, you don't want to take risk. You don't want to buy the wrong product for your kids. You don't want to buy the wrong product for yourself, right? So brands that deliver the promise, you have to just deliver what you say, So that's really important. Also, because female consumers tend to be a little bit more attentive to detail, if you will. Things that come across to her as surprise, for example, delighters, let's say, in the package, or new products, or bring her things that are innovative, or finding new ways to connect with her. Those go a long way in making her feel good about associating herself ongoing with the brand. So surprising the consumer ongoing. And I think the last one, it's not very often talked, which I think is really, really a miss. Let's say if you're in the consumer packaged goods, you don't talk that much about service. But I really feel that for me, female consumers, a good service associated with your product is really a sign of support. And service today means a lot of things. Service today, places like social media or like Facebook has really become the new 1-800 line, just online,
Yes.
But what are those things that if the consumer has a problem with your product, how are you solving it, right? Can you be doing to help her find your product in an easier way? How is it that you almost how do you bring that personal experience of the personal shopper, right?
Yes.
Into the type of service and support that you can provide the female consumers when they purchase. Because let me tell you, it's all about making her life simpler. So I think thinking through how brands can provide better service without being actually a service company might be something that I think marketers can push themselves on much more.
That's powerful stuff. You say. So you're right. In my days in consumer packaged goods world, you're right. I don't remember us having deep discussions at all about how we can improve our service. That is very interesting. Wow, that is. Boy, you're making my head swell up here a little bit there. There you go. So, okay, all right then. How does the relationship that a brand has with its female consumers differ from the relationship that a brand has with its male consumers, in your experience?
I think it changes by brand, right, and the level of involvement in the category. I think there are some categories that you can exude more passion from consumers. As I said, there's some categories, let's say for males, where the passion and the level of engagement, if you will, let's say sports and cars, you will see levels of devotion and associated very, very high in those categories for the male consumer, similar to what you would see perhaps in the beauty category for females.
Okay.
So I think it's all about what is the type of relationship the consumer expects to have with the brand. And I think women can be at times have higher expectations on the relationship that they want to build with the brand. This, going back to that point of service. And I think that is at times why with the female consumers, you almost need to recognize that she expects to be understood. And if you treat the connection with the consumer as a relationship building process, you will find that there are certain things that you might need to pay more attention to than if you were talking to another consumer, let's say, for this matter, male, where the relationship building process might not be as, let's say, as detailed or as intensive, if you will.
As a male, speaking simply for myself, I can tell you that I don't spend much time concerning myself with whether or not the brand, do they understand me? I don't think about it consciously, at least. Certainly there's a subconscious component. Consciously, it's so right at what you're saying, because I want the brand to just do the thing. Whatever it's supposed to, just do the thing and leave me alone, right? Whereas I see a different sort of, again, this is all anecdotal, but I do see a different relationship to the brands among my daughters and, of course, my wife, my mother-in-law. I do see there is a sense of an understanding or a real relationship, whereas me, I want to keep it at arm's length, like just do what you're supposed to do and get out of my face. Wow, okay.
Absolutely.
Now, touching on that, what have you discovered in your experience? What is it that can make female consumers love a brand, really love it?
I think the brand needs to tell them why they do what they do and what's in it for her, and how is it that a brand will solve her needs in a better way than another one. So as simple as that. We're in the branding world because we're trying to drive differentiation and brand preference among brands. And that's what we should be telling consumers. This is why I'm going to solve your needs better than this other brand or than the no-name brand.
Yep.
And this is how we can build a relationship together. This is what I can offer you that will make your life better.
Yeah, you mentioned I'll call it the no. You said no-name brand, but I'll call it the non-brand brands that are out there. Is it Is it more difficult in today's world? Have you found it to be more difficult to make the case about your brand in today's world than maybe today compared to 10 years ago? Or is it easier, the same? To make in the world of there's so much information, people can go online and search for all kinds of things. Does that make your job easier or more difficult, or is it you just don't even notice it?
I think it makes the job more difficult, but I think it's the right challenge for marketers. It really forces them to be much more focused on who they are as a proposition and be humble and recognize that it will not appeal to everybody, or that you're better off at times designing for a consumer that is very attractive, but it's not everybody, right? I think in terms of non-branded brands, I think it depends on the category that we're talking about, because the same consumer who might be willing to buy a non-brand product in one might not be willing to buy a non-branded product in another.
Okay.
So I think it really depends on how important that category is for the consumer, and again, what, let's say, driver of choice and what need she's trying to solve. So that is, I think, where, yes, the good news is that everyone can play today. Anyone can build a brand today. And, you don't have to have massive budgets today to drive awareness of any brand, but it does force anyone who's willing to create a brand or be in the world to be really, really crystal clear on what is it that they offer, on who is the right consumer to offer it to. So you can really use the resources to focus on that and create preference where it's going to make a difference.
Okay, goodness. Wow. Is there any particular way that you've discovered in your experience to keep female consumers engaged with you and not drifting?
I think following the model of thinking about the relationship between the brand, and it's an analog to human relationships, right? There's a phase where, you become aware, you meet the guy and you're trying to figure out if it's the right guy for you or not, right? So you associate a type of judgment to, is it the right person or not? You continue to learn more. You decide whether you continue to see each other or not. And then you decide maybe to get married or not. And that's, I guess, you can choose to stay married or not, right? And each stage of that relationship, even human or with the brand, is an ongoing assessment of, is there common value in this relationship for each other? And each cycle might have a very different way to keep the consumer engaged. If you're, let's say, on the awareness phase, right, it's all about sending her the right message, right? Once she's in the consideration set, is what is that hook that you're going to give her so that she remembers that message when she's, let's say, at the store or online shopping? And once she gets the product, what is the one thing that you're going to do to surprise her, to delight her, to really close the deal? And then are you going to follow up with that purchase? What is it that, not only that you have to deliver on your promise, but what is it? What is that sign of support that you can give her ongoing so that your brand can be in her consideration set ongoing and decide to stay in the relationship? So I like thinking about it that way because it makes it moves it from a transaction to a connection. And to establish a connection, you need to find different ways to keep it going.
Moves from a transaction to a connection. Let me write that down. Wow, you're right. I was sitting there thinking, this is almost relationship counseling you're giving me here, and I've asked myself that question. Boy, am I really? Wow, very good, very good. How often? Well, let me back up here a second because I want to talk about the social aspect of it. In the world of social media, maybe this question, maybe I don't have any need to ask this question, but you're giving me so much great stuff. I'm going to throw it at you. Should a brand be as social or more social or less social as their female consumers? I'm talking about social media. Is there a need to meet them there? And if so, how so? How do you meet them socially?
Yeah. I mean, social media, which is what everyone talks about today, really, can really play a role in establishing a channel of communication and a connection with the consumer. But I really feel it's just one of the many outlets to connect. because I don't think consumers today are going around saying, oh, I'm going to proactively reach out to these brands to connect with them. Right? We have just, let's say brands have decided, oh, they're there and they're chatting and they're liking stuff. Let us be there. I think sooner rather than later, we will have to accept the fact that social media, as we know it from a marketing point of view, is just another marketing vehicle. And that's something that marketers are realizing, and I think that's something that consumers are realizing, because social media started as a way for people to connect. And yes, there's some badges of honor that people like to display by associating themselves with brands, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just another vehicle. As I said earlier, sometimes we need to think about it also for some consumers. It might just be like the 1-800 line now in a digital format. So I think it works differently for many brands, but it definitely plays a role. But I would say is consider it, okay, both as a media vehicle, and then if you really decide to establish a channel of communication with her, what does that look like? And is it really helpful to her or not?
Wow. And then under your earlier question, in your response regarding much like the stages of a consumer relationship, that's using just if it's just another vehicle, then it really becomes another way to add value to the relationship, to communicate the right message, to deliver the hook, to keep delighting, those sorts of things. Fair enough? That makes sense?
Exactly. Exactly. And I have this discussion with the students all the time, because my students, this is the Masters in Branding program, so they're all professionals, and, we have this conversation all the time where what does it mean to build brands in the digital world, right? Now that there's a lot more of those vehicles available. And I also, realize that it's almost like this new thing that every marketer wants to do. Okay, I have to be in digital, and that's how I need to connect with consumers. And I think we just need to think about it as a vehicle, just because the world has changed, right? You cannot just think about, that digital world. The world has changed, but I have to be completely honest. The core principles on why an idea works and when a consumer wants to connect with the message doesn't change. The principles of what makes a strong idea should really be neutral regardless of the vehicle that you choose to connect with. The vehicle that you choose to connect with is the relevancy part, right? But you can fall in love with technology, or let's be in social media, etc. If you don't have the right message, or you completely miss the reason why the consumer might want to connect with you, you're just not going to be effective. So I think there's a careful balance as we look at all the new great vehicles that we have to use as marketers. We cannot forget that strong ideas and the core of ideas and marketing 101 and brand management 101 still applies, even if we're playing with different vehicles today.
Wow. Okay. All right. Perfect. The fundamentals they remain the same. How often do you develop? I just want to know about kind of your day or your year or your quarter. How often do you develop strategic plans with the sales, marketing, and executive folks you deal with? Frequently, infrequently?
Yeah, well, I think that's just the DNA of brand management, right? You need to grow your brand and your business with a very disciplined approach. And to do that, you really need, the strength of a full team and different disciplines to build the strategy. Without enough strategy, you're just shooting in the dark. You become just one more branded expression in the very overwhelming world of brand choices.
Excellent. All right. Perfect. Excellent. All right then. I found that the greatest minds that I have the great pleasure to speak with are all as busy as they are. They find time to read things. So, what do you read that educates you?
It's a good question. Well, I need to do a lot of reading for my classes, right? Because I update all the readings every year. So I'm a very good student of my profession, if you will. I think I could give you a couple of categories that could be helpful to the audience. I think the first thing, probably by now, you probably figure out that I'm a big fan of the hardcore theory and the classics and going back to basics. So I really, use quite frequently the traditional books of brand management like Keller's and Aker books. I love Learning Organization by Peter Senge, right? So a lot of those traditional brand management books that really have the basics, I think anyone should just brush up their studies by just having read some of those books, and I try to do that with my students as well.
Excellent.
I think there's great management books, that talk about leadership skills, like Good to Great is, of course, a traditional one. I also love First 90 Days from Michael Watkins. It's a great book as well. And then I think the third category for me is I try to look where the puck is going and what are the future trends.
Okay.
There's, which is, our world is changing at a very fast pace. There's a great book that is called New Emerging Nationals and New Emerging Multinational Companies. I actually had the pleasure to interview one of the authors who is a chair professor at INSEAD. And it's a phenomenal book that talks about companies, the new emerging multinational companies that are actually not U.S.-based companies. So it has great examples like Mahindra trucks from India and Natura brands from Brazil. A fascinating book that talks about, the other side of the world on how are they redefining branding and how to grow their business. And then I've been a student as of lately of more of this concept of mindful leadership, which, it's a big trend, which is basically realizing that we need to be more wholesome leaders to be to establish really human-to-human connections, and that this idea of strong leaders that have amazing business accolades, but could also meditate on the side and see the benefits of that. I think that's kind of where we're going. So I recently started reading Arianna Huffington's Thrive, which I think it's a good call to action of being a more wholesome leader and considering wellness also as a metric of success as well. So
and
there's a couple things.
What was that name again? What was that name of the last thing?
Thrive.
Okay.
From Arianna Huffington. Yeah, so I read a big mix of classics, great management books, and future trends.
Okay, all right then. And final question for you, I think it's the final one. What is your big dream when it comes to marketing to women? What animates you and you think, wow, this would be huge?
Thanks for letting me dream a little today. I would say I have two wishes. I think one is on the marketing itself. I think we just need to continue to push for brands that are more well-defined in terms of their purpose when they offer women to really solve their needs, right? It shouldn't be a guessing game. As we talked about the relationship concept, right? It's become a hard dating game with brands. The candidates really need to make it easier for the female consumer, and why are they the right ones for them. So I think it's talking about what are the fundamentals with having the simplicity and the focus at the center on clarity on how these brands are and why they're solving women's need, I think is very important. So that's the marketing component. The second one, which I think was connected to what I started sharing with you, my interest on mindful leadership, I think leaders behind brands that market to women need to be more wholesome. I think showing this perfect balance of rational and emotional traits, right? Even for the leaders that are managing brands that are reaching female consumers, not only helps them to be better leaders, but also helps them connect better with the consumers. It's about really nurturing, all the different aspects in connecting with the consumer as well. And honestly, as a female executive, I also see great benefits of, let's say, more women like me being behind brands that are able to bring that more balance approach of, let's say, traits like clarity, focus, compassion, and courage, which is, a mix of almost the right brain and the left side of the brain, as successful business practices and successful brand propositions for female consumers. So I think that's my wish. It's kind of a little bit of both the marketing itself and, I think the future leaders behind brands need to be more wholesome so they can connect better, because people want to connect with purposes and they want to be treated like real people, not just as an object of someone who will buy a product so that my P&L can go up. So those are my two wishes.
Okay, all right then. That is fantastic. Is there anything else you'd like to share? You are a wonderful teacher. Is there anything else you'd like to share today that I have not asked you?
No, that's great. I would love, let's say, to stay connected with you, Daryl, and if there are any questions regarding branding, people can follow me on Twitter. I also have my seminar at the School of Visual Arts, and I love exchanging thoughts on branding and marketing and going back to the basics and mindful leadership. So anyone in the audience who wants to reach out would love to connect.
What is your Twitter handle?
Rogoll, Rogoll.
And I know you're there on LinkedIn as well, and you're there as well.
Yes.
So it's fantastic. Any other way you wanted to tell us? Any other way to connect with you?
I think those are the great places, and
okay.
I have a lot of students, and my seminar is very popular. Hopefully, one day it might even become a book.
There you
go.
So
that is something that would be great, so we can continue to share and discuss how to build brands in a mindful way, so that there's more star brands out there fulfilling consumer needs.
My goodness. Well, thank you so much for your time. I mean, when you make your way to Austin, Texas, which is where I'm headquartered, let's have ribs. Do you eat ribs?
Yeah.
well, beautiful. If you ever make it down to Austin, Texas, I'm inviting you to have ribs with me. It'll be a great time, and you'll get a chance to school me even more.
I would love that, Daryl. Thank you so much.
I loved Carolina's insights. I have one final question, and this one is for you. That means you out there listening. How will you use what you've learned from my conversation with Carolina before your head hits the pillow tonight? That's my question to you. How will you use what you've learned before your head hits the pillow tonight? As a thank you for joining me today on Female Economics, Why Women Buy, JanetTV.com and I want to give you a free ebook I've created called 50 Ways to Elevate Your Marketing to Women. It's full of tips that will help your brand maximize its connection to female consumers, leading to more sales, profits, and market share. Just go to JanetTV.com/50ways and you can download it immediately. That's JanetTV.com/5, and the word ways, WAYS. This has been Daryl Mobley for JanetTV.com's Female Economics, Why Women Buy podcast. Enjoy life. If you would like to learn more about the Female Economics Show, you wish to be considered for an interview on the Female Economics Show, or you'd like for me, Daryl Mobley, to present to your organization, please send an email to us at partners@janettv.net. That's partners@janettv.net.